Oh, my name is David. I am going to be debuting some aspects of the 2022-2023 high school policy resolution. We're going to talk about what the resolution is, what it means, some arguments, and then we're going to talk about or preview some aspects of the case that you'll be working with for the rest of the week. So far you've been learning about arguments, argument construction, case construction, and now we're going to put real elements of the topic into it. Everyone good?
Yes.
Okay, so the resolution for the year is as follows. Resolved, the United States federal government should substantially increase its security cooperation with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in one or more of the following areas: artificial intelligence, biotechnology, cybersecurity. The United States federal government should substantially increase its security cooperation with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in one or more of the following areas: artificial intelligence, biotechnology, cybersecurity. So, this resolution has a lot of words, has a lot of contextual terms that are relevant and important, and each of them comes together to make the resolution a viable policy option. So we'll talk about what each of these terms means to start. First, the United States federal government. What is the United States federal government? Anyone? The what?
The American government.
Yes, but what is the federal government? What is it? Yes.
Specifically, like the branches of government, like executive, legislative, and judicial.
Yes. The federal government, as a term, generally refers to the three branches of the federal government: the legislative, which is Congress; the judicial, which is the Supreme Court; and the executive, which is the president and his cabinet. By definition, the term United States federal government, as a singular term, normally refers to all of these branches together. So it is typically said that specifying one of them may be questionably topical. But that's a conversation for another day. Should. What does should mean? What does should mean?
Highly advised.
Highly advised. Okay. Any other thoughts? Yes.
Obligation.
Yes. You have to have an obligation. What does should mean? Anyone else? Yes.
David, you should actually plug in so that what you're seeing there, they can see, so it's also visual as well.
Okay.
Like so they can see the topic, so they can see some of the notes that you have as you're going.
Wait, so in this context, I think what should mean is like it is their duty.
Yes. Precisely. There is a duty or right? Oh, no. Okay. There is a duty or obligation for us to do something. And in this case, us refers to the United States federal government. Substantially increase. Now, this we're not going to go through a lot because the word substantially modifies the verb increase. We all understand that increases mean to make greater, to add stuff, but the term substantially increase notably can be either qualitative or quantitative. So by this, I mean that a substantial increase might be measured by way of its impact, how significant the increase is, or by way of its, number. So how many more things are done in excess of what's currently being done now. The next term, it's security cooperation. It's security cooperation. What does this mean? Anyone? This is the hardest term in the topic to define. Yes.
Say security cooperation is like as cooperation meaning to work together with someone on something, and security just meaning like the secureness of like the general.
Okay, you have just described something interesting. So yes, you are allowed to define a word or a term by way of dividing them. So by defining security and cooperation, you can develop a comprehensive definition for security cooperation. But it's also possible to think of this as a term of art, as something where it requires being together in order for the definition to come through.
Can you explain term of art
Yes.
to them and write that term down? What is a term of art?
So, a term of art is a specific use of language where two phrases come together to take, or two or more phrases come together to take on a specific meaning by being used together. So while their definition can be understood separately, it is only reasonably understood in a particular context based on being used together. There is a definition that is applied specifically to the context it's being used for. That is a term of art. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, so security cooperation is typically a term of art, and it is used normally to describe military to military cooperation between two entities, whether those be two different countries or two different organizations. The reason why it is understood this way as a term of art is because the job of defending security is normally understood as a job for military institutions, right? The military defends, the national security of the United States, typically. So, security cooperation is cooperation, working together between two military institutions, military to military engagement. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
All right. With the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, this is where there's a bit of history, and I'd like everyone to write this down. As we've mentioned previously, this is a topic about military to military cooperation. Now, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is a military institution. As a military institution, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which I will now call NATO for the rest of this, was formed in August 24th, 1949. This was directly after World War II. Globally, we were building a ton of, multilateral institutions. Multilateral institutions are institutions between multiple countries. And the idea was that the more you entangle the world, right, the more you emphasize bringing the world together, the less likely conflict is between each, separate unit. So a perfect example is the League of Nations, which eventually became the United Nations. It was spearheaded by the United States and, President Woodrow Wilson, but the United States Congress refused to ratify the League of Nations, and therefore the U.S. couldn't join. However, what we did do was help form the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which came into force August 24th, 1949. The member countries of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization include Albania, Belgium, Bulgaria, Canada, Croatia, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Montenegro, Netherlands, North Macedonia, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Turkey, United Kingdom, and the United States. Now, this is an extremely long list of countries, correct? Anyone think that if I took this off, you could name every one of those countries back to me?
No.
Cool. The good news is you don't need to know every one of these countries. At some point, some of them will be more relevant than others. No offense to North Macedonia, but in the context of the resolution and the influence that it exercises, the United States or the United Kingdom matters slightly more to the organization than, let's say, Albania or North Macedonia. But the good news is that this list is most important for the country or countries that are missing from it. This is supposed to be a list that helps us understand European security, right? So there's the only non-European countries on this list are the United States and Canada. But there is a very important, very large European country whose name is not on this list. Anybody have a guess?
Russia.
Yes, the Russian Federation is not on this list. And the reason why the Russian Federation is not on this list, besides the fact that they didn't sign on to NATO, is that NATO's principal purpose now is defending European sovereignty against Russia. That's not their expressed purpose, but it is their de facto purpose. Anyone remember what de facto means from Larry Ham's conversation? De facto, remember Larry Ham from 3 days ago? de facto, as a matter of fact, so basically as a matter of principle, in contrast to de jure, which is as a matter of procedure or by law. So it's not written into NATO, like there's no document in NATO that says our job is to fight Russia, but it is understood by everyone that the principal job of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is to defend European sovereignty primarily against the encroachment of the Russian Federation. So there will be plenty of conversations on this resolution about how to best deal with the threat of Russia. Yes? Because they view, well, a couple of reasons why Russia generally doesn't want to. One is that they view multilateral institutions in general as dangerous to their sovereignty. So they don't like NATO because they see a giant block of European countries, many of whom surround them, forming together, and they view just that formation, just the military formation and assemblage of military people or of military institutions around their border as a threat. The second reason why is because they have a completely different political and economic philosophy to many of the countries on this list. By definition, many of the countries on this list are democratic institutions. They emphasize democracy, free elections. The Russians are not. They are an oligarchy. Some may say they are a dictatorship. And notably, many of these countries are capitalist and emphasize free markets. The Russians perceive themselves as communists, and therefore they despise that understanding. So they're structured against each other. So the way that NATO ends up defending itself against, encroachments by the Russians is by conducting global missions and operations. Those global missions and operations happen in a lot of places, but there are three notable areas they do not occur in. Those three notable areas are artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and biotechnology. And this isn't to say that they don't have any engagements in those areas, but their engagements in those areas are woefully insufficient. They're not good right now at all. There's actually a very interesting reason for that. Remember that this treaty came into force August 24th, 1949. On a scale of 1 to 10, please rate how good you think the world's artificial intelligence was in 1949. 5, okay? 0.7. Anyone else have a guess for how good they think artificial intelligence was in 1949?
I'll move it down to a
3. A 2. Any answer you give that is lower than, I would say 3 works. Basically, artificial intelligence wasn't a thing, right? Basic technology was still in its infancy. To put it in perspective, the first iPhone came into force in 2007? So you're talking about a gap of nearly or a little bit under 60 years. I don't know, I'm not that good at math, as some clearly know. So technology was still in its infancy. The treaty was not drafted in a manner that made emerging technology, right? New technology, new weapons, new dangerous weapons that were coming out. It didn't anticipate any of them. So you know how some people say that we need to rewrite the American Constitution? Because, for example, when the founders wrote about guns, they didn't realize that we would one day have semi-automatic machine guns, right? They didn't predict that element of technological development when they said everyone should be able to own a gun. So some people advise that we rewrite that. Well, the same thing applies to NATO. They didn't predict how fast and how dangerous technology would become, so they didn't really write into their laws or their infrastructure how to deal with emerging threats. So the resolution asks us the question, how do we adapt to incoming emerging technology? Artificial intelligence is going to grow significantly over the span of the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years. Biotechnology is going to grow significantly over the span of the next 10, 20, 30, 50 years. And cybersecurity threats we are seeing right now as we entangle more and more of our assets on Earth, in space, everywhere. Everything is becoming digital. So everything the military uses is also becoming digitized. That means that if we don't have tip-top cybersecurity, any of those things that are now digitized could become immediately threatened by places like Russia, by places like China, internally, from terrorists. There are plenty of potential scenarios, right? So let's go through each of the parts of the resolution and talk through some of them, talk through each of the topic areas. The first is artificial intelligence. What is artificial intelligence? Anybody? Yes.
The development of computer systems?
The development of computer systems. So computer systems influence artificial intelligence, but they are not by themselves artificial intelligence, right? Do you think the computer in front of you is AI? There's AI coded into it, right? There's definitely some programs coded into it. But artificial intelligence as a thing is more. Yes.
I guess an artificial intelligence is the concept theory that computers or technology systems can be able to perform human skills.
Yes. Be able to perform define human skills.
I guess like decision making, speech recognition, like stuff like basically like speaking languages.
Okay.
Making decisions, speaking properly, recognition of like different kinds of things, like basically senses through sight and speech, and then translating languages.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, for the most part, that does capture a lot of what artificial intelligence is, right? Artificial intelligence is the use of digital or computer programs to perform functions often by themselves, right? So artificial intelligence is built into everything that we do, but the most popular things that we're thinking about when thinking about the future of artificial intelligence is threefold. One, how does artificial intelligence help us make future decisions? So, for example, surveillance technology, biometric technology, right? How does our understanding of technology help us make political decisions, help us make political predictions and calculations? Second is
What's that first one? How you're talking about AI, and you said how well it helps us make political decisions. What do you mean by that?
So political decisions, and every political decision is made by way of a political calculus. And by this I mean that politicians take a wealth of data and then they use it to synthesize what political choices would be best to make. Artificial intelligence, right, automatic programs that gather data, that do the work of gathering this data, are now being trusted more than ever to be the source of data that influences our decisions. But if that data is incorrect, if it's gathered incorrectly, perhaps if it's gathered in a way that targets people, right, we can make very disastrous political decisions, right?
Can you give us an example of that?
Perfect.
Like an example of how artificial intelligence, like you're saying basically that we have judgment right now, politicians, people have been making decisions. But right now, we are creating computers that can make decisions and we're trusting them.
Yep.
So we're not just trusting the computers to make decisions for rappers. Like you heard that one about the artificial intelligent rapper, right? Is that make-believe rapper? It was programmed, I don't know the full story behind it, but there was a rumor that it was programmed by a white programmer who was using the N-word.
Yeah, it was programmed to mimic rap. So it took a lot of data about what constitutes the most successful records in rap, right? What is the most successful style of rap? What is the best, coded word? So for example, if you type a word into your iPhone, right, your iPhone will give you the next word it predicts that you want to type, right? And it'll do that over and over and over again.
Wait, that's artificial intelligence?
Yeah, that counts. That genuinely counts, right?
Okay.
Because what it's doing is making a basic prediction. It's a very basic one, right? But in some way it can predict what your next word is supposed to be.
So artificial intelligence is really about computers making autonomous decisions.
Precisely.